Welcome to the Happy Rise, the space of freedom where you can experiment the joy. And I'm very proud to welcome Clayton Ilolahia.
Thank you. Wow, good pronunciation. It's not easy.
Thank you so much. And we will speak about an art. You travel all over the world, and you can have a good idea about what's the smell of the world.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is interesting.
And first of all, can you maybe present you and how you like to be presented nowadays?
Yeah. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's a real honor to be on your podcast, and also, as I understand it, the first guest speaking in English. So
yes,
this is really nice. A little bit about me. So I live in Australia, in Sydney. This is really my home. But with the work that I do in perfumery, I'm often in Paris, which is how we know each other. And we've had the pleasure of having many conversations over the last couple of years about perfume. And my job, so one of the jobs I have is working for a company called Fragrances of the World, which is really like an encyclopedia of all of the fine fragrances in the perfume market. And so my job as an evaluator is to be working with all of the brands and the perfumers and smelling everything that's being brought into the market. And through that, I give it an olfactive classification. I think a lot of people, if they don't understand perfumery, the first thing they say when I say I'm an evaluator is like, oh, do you say if it's good or not? But this isn't really my job. My job is not to say if something smells good or not. And for me, everything is an interesting smell. But it's more that we have an olfactive language, which was created by the company that I work for and the founder, Michael Edwards. And so my job is to smell everything and to classify it olfactively in his families. So that a little bit like when you go to a library, if you're looking for all of the books on a certain topic, you know where you go to the library to find them. So my job is to make sure that all of the smells and all of the perfumes of the world are classified together, so that if you're looking for a particular type of perfume, it's very easy for you to find things that have a similar olfactive category. So that's my job.
So you have a world view about all fragrances and the invisible, because this sense of the five senses is the most mysterious.
Yes, it is. It's very mysterious, and we track around almost 4,000 new fragrances every year coming into the market. So it's but as the world becomes more interested in perfume, it's making my job more interesting because previously everything was either, the French are known for perfumery, of course Italy as well, and parts of Germany. So it was very a European-centric, I think, art form. Of course, America, the UK are big contributors to perfumery. But in more recent years, we're seeing a lot of brands from the Middle East and from now Asia, even places like India, so South Asia, and Australia as well, are coming up with new brands that are, I think, interesting because it changes the types of conversations that we're having, certainly the types of smells that I'm experiencing in my job. So this is, it's an interesting time.
But Clay, you didn't start in perfumery. So what's the turning point that led you?
Yeah, so I grew up in New Zealand, went to school in New Zealand, went to university in New Zealand. I studied visual arts, and from a very young age, I remember at the age of 7, knowing that I wanted to go to art school and that was my future. So I followed through and I did that. And then it was after graduating from university from art school that I moved to Melbourne in Australia. New Zealand's a lovely place. It's very beautiful, but there are more sheep there than there are people. So it's a very quiet country. And when you're in your early 20s and you want to experience the world, a lot of New Zealanders either move to London or they move to Australia. So I moved to Australia. Melbourne was known as the cultural capital of Australia. Sydney's more corporate, more financial. And so when I moved to Australia, I discovered niche perfumery for the first time. So a lot of brands which you would have grown up with here in France, so things like Diptyque, Creed, Frederic Malle, like all of these sort of artistic brands that were beginning to rise and become really important to perfumery. This is in the early mid-2000s. And so that was when I thought, I'd never thought of perfume that way before. For me, it was always, if you're a perfume brand, you were linked to, say, a designer, so a couturier, or Chanel, Yves Saint Laurent, Dolce & Gabbana, these sort of big brands. It never felt like an industry for me that was very creative and artistic at a basic level. So these brands like Diptyque inspired me to think, oh, I've always had an interest in smell. I never really connected that to perfume, but I grew up on a farm in New Zealand, so I have a very strong memory of all the smells of the farm growing up, good smells and what we say, bad smells. And so that set me off on a journey to learn about perfumery. At the time I was working in fashion. So fast forward a few years, I was the training manager for Louis Vuitton for Australia and New Zealand. So that job in itself allowed me to travel a lot. I've always had jobs that have taken me sort of around the world. And so I was traveling through Asia, coming to France for meetings, and traveling all around Australia and New Zealand. And I decided that I wanted to learn this art of perfumery. So while I was traveling, I started writing a blog about perfumes. And these were reviews that were sort of personal memoirs of fragrances that I had worn through my teenage years or in my early adulthood, and new fragrances that I was exploring and discovering as I was traveling around the world with my job. And that sort of took off. And it was at a time where small niche brands, they didn't have the marketing budgets that some of them do today. There was no L'Oreal or Estee Lauder companies sort of investing in these small brands. So if there was someone that was just passionate about perfume, that was willing to write about them and talk about them, they invited you in. And so that was that really helped me to, I guess, get behind the door and see it's quite a secretive world. I don't know if you've found this, but as an outsider, and coming from a place in the world where perfume is not our culture, it's hard to get behind the door. But once you do, everyone's so open and welcoming. So the blog was my way to get behind the door and really see and talk to perfumers and understand their creative processes. I spent a couple of summers in Grasse. So I went to the Grasse Institute of Perfumery, and they have an English-speaking program that they run over the summers. So I did 3 summer schools. And then from there, I just, I built an organ in my house and was creating fragrances, accords, and experimenting. If I was interviewing a perfumer about a new fragrance they'd worked on, I'd say, oh, how did you do this? And they're like, oh, well, blah, 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 blah. So, okay, and I'd be writing notes, and then I'd go home and I'd be like, okay, I'm going to try that. And, oh, I can see how this relates to this. And so I didn't take that the traditional educational path for a perfumer of doing a chemistry degree and then going to ISIPCA and Versailles. I skipped all of that. But over the course of, now we're talking 20 years, just little by little, doing my own experiments, talking with perfumers. Having this job that I have now with Fragrances of the World is amazing because I get to smell so much. And you find your way slowly, but in your own way. And so that's what I do. Aside from that, I do work as a scent artist. So I still, as I say, art was always my background. And now I do, so I have an exhibition in Japan, in Kyoto, in 2 weeks' time. And so I'll be taking some work there where I'll sort of be showing this idea of, I guess, olfactory art, where sure, it's perfume, but I think when it's art, you're not limited to the smell in the bottle and the smell needing to make someone feel nice about themselves. You can really present ideas that maybe are a little bit more challenging, that maybe they only want to smell to an experience, but they don't want to wear on their skin. So for me, there's a lot more freedom if you're a creator, creating fragrances in this way.
You said that in your childhood you were in the farm.
Yeah.
So what kind of souvenir you have? Because it wasn't there was some animals, or there was.
Yeah, we had everything. I grew up. My best friends were animals growing up. I think the closest neighbors, human neighbors to me, were about a kilometer down the road. So I had a very active imagination as a kid because I had no human like other kids around me, aside from obviously you go to school. And so I grew up, I had 9 cats because they kept on having sex with each other and making more cats. So I was surrounded by cats. I had 2 horses, we had chickens, we had cows, had 1 dog. So yeah, I had many animals. Some of my early smell memories of the farm would be the smell of hay, particularly in summer. So if you walk into a barn and you have this really, interesting smell of the air is very still because there's no breeze, but you have all of that hay there. And so, I know now it's this molecule coumarin, which is, we use it. It's coming from things like tonka bean, and you can use it in many different ways in different perfumes. But it's really the smell of, like warm hay, still air, and then also because there's animals, so it's a little bit fecal. So like cow shit.
Of course, but it's life.
Yeah. Yes.
So,
yeah. So these smells, and then there was a creek that ran through my farm. So I spent a lot of time playing around the creek, which is a smell of like water. We have like watercress growing, wild watercress, so sort of bitter green smell with the water and mud. And my first flower that I really remember was daffodils, which grew on the side of a hill. My house sort of dropped down into a hill and the creek was below. So there were these wild daffodils that grew, and so them being like a spring or a cold season flower, and kind of connect this idea of the temperature being cold, but the sort of the waxy smell of daffodils.
If I understand, you experiment a lot by yourself, because by lonely, without people, and after you meet lots of people and smells.
Yeah.
And so, how we can say that a smell could impress in yourself before images could be quicker than an image?
It's an interesting question because we know scientifically that the olfactive system is really connected to this, it's connected to memories, it's connected to this old part of the brain, which sort of bypasses the newer part of your brain. So the newer part being the neocortex, which is your center for logic and thinking. And so often if you smell something, it's bypassing all of this thought process and it goes directly into this very old part of your brain, which is responsible for things like memories and emotions. So for me, that's really interesting because as an artist, and particularly if you're working with time-based art, so if you're like a filmmaker, you're telling a story using time and it's on a chronological sort of progression. But with perfume, because it's instantly goes to this part of the brain, there's no sense of time. And so all of these images flood back and they're overlaid and you sort of experience everything in a flash. So for me, that's really exciting as a creator because it allows you to try and tap into these really raw memories and emotions that people have. So I think it's an exciting art form.
The smell is sometimes a forgotten sense because we don't practice it a lot in the days. So have you some tips to improve this sense?
Yeah, it's funny because people, when you're right, we're not taught to smell in school. And this we can track back to sort of the days of the Greek philosophers where they looked at animals and saw how animals were so controlled by their sense of smell, and they felt that humans should be above this. So they saw the sense of smell as being more of a animalistic or animal trait. So they wanted to rise above that. So the sense of smell really got overlooked, I think, in the way education has evolved. And so often when people hear about what I do for work, and if they're not from the perfume industry, they think, they say you must have a very good natural sense of smell. Maybe that's true, but I just think it's because I've practiced a lot. And I think once you draw your attention to this amazing sense that we have and we've forgotten, the best way to use it is just to be more conscious of it. And so I sort of encourage anyone, if you're wherever you are, and if you go to a restaurant, you're probably tasting the food, you're listening to the music, the ambience, and but you forget to smell. So I think it's just always remember to smell your environment and even when we came to sit down here to have this interview, it's an immediate thing where I'm like, oh, I can smell this, I can smell this, I can smell this.
It's true, it's true. It was the first sentence when you see it. Yes.
So I think exploring your world as much as you can. And the other thing with the way the smell works, your sense of smell, is because it's connected to this whole part of your brain. Your new part of your brain is the center for communication. And so this is why often it's hard for us as humans when we smell something to be able to communicate what we're smelling, because we're using two different parts of our brain. So I think once you forgive yourself for that, because I think sometimes people think, oh, I'm not good at this because I can't talk about it. That's fine. But I think, if you can smell your environment and just be conscious, just be aware, be in the moment, be present. I think this is a great way to start to just be more aware of the world you live in using your sense of smell.
Okay, so just smell as you see, as you can feel, and then you be concentrated on the feeling, even if you can't express it very clearly. And then you can have some emotions. So how it works. The sensation of smelling and the emotions you can.
And even in my job as an evaluator, so often I'll be thinking, when I'm smelling, what is this like, or what is this not like? And you can do that with your environment, I think. And so when you're a fun thing to play is when you're smelling something, going, what is this similar to? What is it like? Or what is it not like? And particularly when you start to see similarities between things, I think that's really interesting, because you see actually the world is made up of all these molecules, and some things that may not have any kind of connection actually have this sense of smell in common. If we think of like ambergris, so ambergris, we say in English, is this extraction which the sperm whales cast out of their bodies, and it floats on the water, or it washes up. If you find a piece, you'll be rich because it's very expensive. But some of the molecules that you'll find in this whale sort of excretion are the same molecules you'll find in your garden and some of the herbs. So it's amazing that this whale and this plant, which have no connection whatsoever, actually have this connection through their chemistry. So I think that's really interesting, and starting to see the world through these connections is another way to experience who we are and where we are.
Yes, and it's an expression of life, because there is not bad smell or a good smell.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's very connection with the soul too, because it's very quick to smell something, and you like or you dislike. So is it a door to go through and to have some clue for yourself too?
It's now we're getting deeper, and I think it depends on your definition of the soul, I guess. For me, in my I guess spiritual learning through this lifetime, I define everything in this material world as being material, and spirit being something completely separate from that. But I think everything can be spiritualized, and everything can be a door into something. So it's just a matter of how you see things. And so certainly I think smell can be that. And as we were saying before, like smells are so connected to your memories, and there's things that I smell that can take me back to being a 5-year-old boy on the farm, and it's instantaneous, and it's almost like picture perfect. It's like a high resolution picture in my head. And so if you think the smell has that power and that ability, now I'm like I was saying as I arrived, I'm turning 50 this year. So that's like 45 years ago. I have this like perfect picture in my head, but I can't even remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. So this is the power of smell. So I think sure there must be this way of connecting this to your spiritual journey through life. Yeah.
So you make choices for your memory of scent too.
Yeah, and I think when you start to know the things that can take you to certain places if you want to go there, then that's always nice to know that you have that in your your toolkit of life to go, I'm having a really bad day today. I just want to be here. Okay, I know if I smell these things, then this will take me to that place. So this is nice to be able to do, I think. Yeah.
So I could imagine if you have a pleasant memory with a certain scent, you can have with you, and for a bad day, as you say,
Yeah.
you can just smell it, and
Yes.
it helps to
Yeah.
to be more
Yeah.
to have more joy.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So you travel all over the world, and there is some rituals or use of perfume very different from countries. And perfume has a gender or not for you? Is that a cultural construction, or there is a gender to perfume?
Definitely a cultural construction. And I would go beyond that to say it's a marketing construction. It's a marketing tool to help brands target a specific audience to sell a product. But you know, and like perfumery is a little bit like painting. So if you look at the colors in an artist's sort of palette of paints, you can't say that one is feminine and one is masculine. It's about the artist using the paint to create a form, and the form is what conveys what they're painting. So if they're painting a man, then the paint is used to paint a man. You can kind of recognize and say that's a man or that's a woman. So I think perfume is the same, where you know, and this is, as you're talking about cultural differences, this is really true too, because you know, we know that if you're in, let's say, the UK, if you have a very rosy perfume, this is typically associated with women. But if you're in the Middle East, rose is very masculine. So you know, the language of this art form is different depending on where you are in the world.
You spoke about marketing. There is some sense in hotel or even in bakery. Even there is no croissant,
Yes.
but you smell the croissant.
Yes.
And so, is there a link between this kind of marketing and the emotions of people and the way they for bestseller?
Yeah, you know, we live in this world of consumerism. So obviously, where there's opportunities to make money, people will find these opportunities and exploit them. So I think the same with smell. And there's a lot of, you know, we talk about odor marketing. There's been a lot of studies put into this idea of, you know, how can you use odor as a way to increase sort of product sales. So yeah.
So we can be manipulated by fragrances too.
Yeah. I mean, this idea of smelling a croissant in a bakery where there's no croissants. What are you going to eat? You're going to eat a croissant.
And even for the niche perfumery, because you speak about big brands, and there is now more and more niche perfumery.
Yeah.
And so is their reaction about the market? Are they influenced to the market too, or really free?
Yeah, we've been having a lot of talks in the industry about the idea of niche and what does niche mean in 2026. And it's evolved so much. You know, if I think I mentioned when I first discovered niche perfumes and the idea of diptyque, or you know, their original store is not far from where we are right now, and you know, you would go there and it would smell of all the candles and you know, it was I think originally three friends from art school who they graduated and they thought, oh, like let's create a little shop. And so they did this, and so now in 2026, niche is so different, and it's in the latest data for Fragrances of the World that we pulled for 2025, niche made up 51% of all of the launches in the world. So niche, by definition, should be a small part of something bigger. Now it's the biggest part. And so everything has changed. I think there's a couple of factors there as well, in that if you're starting a small brand, a niche brand in 2026, a lot of the sort of objectives of these brands is to start small, because it's your foot is in the door. It's easy, you know, you don't need as much capital to begin, but to grow and become attractive to, say, L'Oreal or a Puig or Estee Lauder in the future. So I think this has really changed the way niches, because previously it was just people doing things that they loved. There was a little bit more, I think, beauty in the way niche used to be, and that the decisions were driven by the idea of just doing something different from the rest and just being themselves and being beautiful. But now it's very commercial, and because everything's growing, those brands, as they grow, they need more people, so their offices become bigger. So where are they finding the talent to come from the offices? It's by going to the big, the Cotis and the Estee Lauders and saying, hey, we need some help with either product development or evaluation or marketing. And so there's people that have had experience working for big brands and now working for smaller brands, and so they bring with them their practices. And then, so now it's interesting because a lot of niche brands are starting to look very designer or very prestige. A lot of prestige and designer brands are starting to look very niche. It's a bit of a soup of all of these, a confluence of all these different influences. And so it's really hard to define what is niche, what is luxury, what is prestige, what is mass in this day and age, because they're sort of, everyone's a bit of everything.
So yes, we need some definitions about every kind of market, if I understand.
But the other interesting thing, I had this experience where my sister's friend's son, I think he's like 12 years old, and he found out that I was working in fragrances, and so he's like, oh, I love fragrances, I want, can you next time you come to New Zealand, because he lives in New Zealand, if you have any samples, I would love to smell some things. So I said, oh, send me a list of your favorite fragrances. And so the list I got, it was everything. It was high-end luxury, it was high-end niche, it was entry-level niche, it was designer fragrances that you'd find at the discount pharmacy. And it really, I think, struck me that young people, particularly Gen Z, they don't see these definitions of niche and luxury. Like, for them, it's irrelevant. They just want to smell good. So I wonder if that will also, like, who do we need these definitions for? Is that for the industry so that we can neatly put everyone down the lane and make them do certain things a certain way? Or is it completely irrelevant in 2026? I'm not sure, but...
I think it's a good way, because it means they can choose, the people can choose by themselves, instead of have some codes from outside and from the society and everything. Yeah. And you said he wants to find a smell good for him. What does it mean? Because there is an interaction with the skin. Yeah. And
I think people smelling good in this day and age, it's, we talked about not having education in smell. So I think a majority of people, when they're looking to smell good, it's not driven by education and kind of going, oh, okay, I know I like these ingredients and I like this sort of style of fragrance and I like to smell like this. A lot of that is driven by, I think, social media. It's driven by compliments. So, and not only compliments that they get themselves, but I know a lot of young people, both boys and girls, are using social media to see what influencers are saying. Oh, when I wear this fragrance, I get a lot of compliments. And so that for them is, I think, one of the deciding factors of whether or not they want to try a fragrance. Which, again, going back to my point of scent as art, it's imagine if everyone only went to galleries to see exhibitions because they only wanted to see art that made them feel beautiful. That's not how art works. So I think for me, it would be sad if perfume became this thing where its only purpose is to make people feel like they feel beautiful. I think it should make us feel all of the emotions.
So it's a way, an expression to be loved too, to be good in the eyes of other people. Yeah. So fragrance is always it's similar to love. Huh? So it's always used as a gift or the smell of someone who you remember you loved. You have the smell in mind. So can you express when you give a gift to with a perfume, or what is the expression for the giver and the person who have it, and the perfume and love?
Yeah, and again, this is all marketing, right? It's all, I don't know if it's the same in France, but when you come to Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day, all of the brands, particularly the designer brands, normally you go to the store and they have the bottle, the fragrance. But around all of those gift-giving periods, they come out with the pack. And so it's the box with the fragrance and maybe a free body lotion or other products, and it's all nicely wrapped. And so for me, this idea of perfume being a symbol of love is it's marketing. And if we think of what perfume's original reason of being was, it's to make people feel closer to God. The name perfume is all about through smoke, and perfume was used as a way to communicate with a higher being or a higher spiritual cause. So at some point we've decided that no, let's just make it about love between two people. So I think it's interesting that, and I think the younger generations are a little bit more broader thinking in terms of what perfume is, for them, and it's not all about, I need to give someone a perfume to show them that I love them. And if anything, I think it's people aren't doing that as much as they were before, because they know love is so much more complex and nuanced than a perfume in a bottle. So I feel like some people, if you gave them a perfume to show them that you love them, I don't know if it would be a good gift for many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What you say is there is multiple choice, more and more choices for fragrances, and even you can made your own measure perfume. Some brands can help you for this. So it's a good sign that this sense now is more attractive, and for ourselves, how we can choose the perfect fragrance.
Yeah, this is another change that we've seen in the way people are wearing fragrances, because it used to be that you would have your signature scent. So there'd be perhaps, and particularly more so for women, but there'd be one perfume that they wore, and that's all they wore. So then for gifts, you had to give them either another bottle of that perfume, or maybe you would give them the body lotion or the shower gel or the soap, or you would find an auxiliary product from that same fragrance line. But marketing and again, niche had a big role to play in this, has sort of changed the way people are wearing fragrances. And now for younger people, they want fragrances that suit their moods, and they know they have many different emotions throughout a day. So they're often looking for fragrances that will help them to celebrate or to, raise up those feelings. So whether they feel joy or they feel excitement, or they want to chill out and just be cocooned and feel safe and protected. People will have a wardrobe of perfume now that they can use to help them through all of those different parts of their day. So I think that's a big change. So I think when people say, what would be a good perfume for me? The first question I always ask is, well, how do you want to feel? And then once you understand that, then that's when you can find fragrances that might help them to feel that way. Part of that might just be, it may not even be the way it smells, it might just be the story. And people are so led by storytelling. So there's some fragrances, it might be the story behind that fragrance is what they connect to when they smell that, and then it helps them to feel a certain way. But others, it might be a little bit more, as we say, it's bypassing this logical part of the brain, and it's just more instinctual, and it's more when they smell that they feel a certain way. Like for me, sometimes I just wear a sandalwood oil, essential oil, just by itself, because that makes me feel very grounded, and it makes me feel very sort of connected to the world, and I don't have any logical explanation for that, but it's just what I do.
So let our intuitions open. When you smell something, it can be you. And you spoke about spiritual sense, and it's true that in some kind of sacred time, you've got some incense, or you've got some resin, some woods. How it can help, even some meditations area, you have some specific smells. How you can say that this kind of smells help you to be more introspective?
Yeah, if we're talking about spirituality, and we've talked about it before, but a lot of my spiritual beliefs are more, I guess, Eastern in origin, and I spent years reading Vedic scriptures, and so I resonate with this philosophy. But if you look at Vedic teachings, they sort of divide this material world that we live in into three modes, or they call them gunas. So you have the mode of ignorance, the mode of passion, and the mode of goodness. And so everything in this world that is in this material world can be divided into these three, or there might be a mixture of gunas within one object. But the spiritual teaching is that you can never get to a transcendental platform from anywhere but the mode of goodness. And so for me, that's something that resonates, that if you're looking to be in a spiritual mindset, you have to remove as much as possible things that are in the mode of ignorance and then the mode of passion. And so smells would all fall into those three modes as well. So I think if you're surrounding yourself with smells that are more in the mode of goodness, then that is going to help you elevate to a transcendental platform.
So it helps really to be more efficient and to be more concentrated.
Yeah. So for me, the smells themselves are not spiritual. It's more that you're using smells in this mode of goodness to help you elevate to a transcendental platform. But that being said, you can spiritualize anything in this material world. But there's certain processes you would have to do for that.
Lots of brands do some storytelling more and more, and so some brands express the darker side of the human and the black side of human. How you can say that this kind of smell can help human, or why we are attracted by this side?
How do I feel about that? Look, I think we're always attracted to danger, right? We're always attracted to the bad boy, to this sort of the James Dean character in the movie.
It's kind.
So I think there'll always be this sort of attraction to things that have the story about being darker. I mean, can you imagine if there was a fragrance that was about a nun in a convent? How many people would be like, oh yeah, that's the smell I want? No, they want the rock and roll guy in the leather jacket, or the bad boy, or the bad girl, the femme fatale. So I think, again, it's one of those things in marketing. I think in that people want to use perfume to feel like they can put on different dresses and different facades and different coverings. So I think for people, sometimes they may not want to be the bad boy, but at least they can smell like the bad boy, and that's enough for them.
So it's the way they will be seen by other people.
Yeah.
So it's a final touch. It's
yeah.
We know, but it's more than this.
It's I think. And it's all about context as well, because there's certain fragrances that I have which are very strong and very, they'll have a lot of animal kind of notes, so musk and civet and castoreum, which smell really quite intense and dirty. But I'll choose the environment that I wear those in, because if you choose the wrong environment, people won't understand and they'll look at you like, please go and have a shower. But in the right company and the right environment, people will appreciate those smells and they'll think that's interesting. So context has a big role to play as well.
So you mean that it's you choose the fragrances, it's a way you want to express something.
Yeah,
it helps to another point to express what you want to be seen.
Yeah,
and is there a feedback? So the fragrance will help you to be this person too?
Yeah, so I think that's another thing you always ask yourself is, am I wearing this perfume just for me and I'm the one enjoying this and for my own particular reasons? Or am I wearing perfume because I want to be noticed and I want people to give me feedback and I want to create a dialogue around smell? And so that's another thing to think about.
Yes, so it helps for interaction with other people.
Yeah. I remember there's an artist, Cecil Tollis, and she does really interesting scent-based work. But one of the experiments she did was she created a really horrible fragrance, and then she went to a very like a black tie gala, and she wore a very beautiful dress, and she did her makeup and her hair, and she looked. If you saw her, you would want to talk to her because she looked very beautiful. But then she sprayed this horrible perfume all over her. And so it was a social experiment to sort of see how people reacted to her. And so yeah, it's interesting. You can use perfume either to attract or to tell people non-verbally to please go away.
Very interesting. Very interesting. And what about the nose? So the creation behind the perfume, is there an instinctive way, or is there very practical how you be a nose and how you create a fragrance?
Yeah, in my experience talking to different perfumers, it's there's no sort of set way. I think if perfumers have gone down a traditional path, they've gone to they've gone to a Sipka, and then they've found their way into one of the large oil houses. They all have their own processes and their ways, but I think it's very individual, and it's a little bit like if I say let's go to Marseille, then everyone will have sure, there's a main highway probably that most people will take this because it's the fastest route, but there will be people that'll be like, oh, let's go the coastal route because it's the nicer scenery, or like let's go this way because I have a friend over here that I want to see along the way. So I think perfume is like that as well, where everyone has their own sort of ways of getting to the end point. They'll always get to the end point, but the journey to get there and the way they write a formula or the way they structure things could be different.
Are you more close than instinctive perfumer to go to the point?
Okay.
Or very structural and step by step? And
yeah, when you're largely self-taught like I am, it's often very instinctual. You might have, I think the thing that I've learned though is you have to have a really clear understanding of what that endpoint is. If you turn up to your organ and you're starting to blending, writing formulas, but you don't have a good sense of where you need to go, then you'll be led off in all sorts of directions. So I think like any art form, whether it's perfume or a visual art, you need to know what you're trying to achieve to get there. If you just decide that you're going to open some paints and start painting on a canvas, you'll end up with a mess very quickly. So it's the same with perfume.
And about the ingredients, there is what is the part now about natural ingredients and synthetic?
Yeah.
What is the trend?
Yeah. I think for me, and maybe it's because of my art background, but there's natural raw materials that I love, and I think it's beautiful. There's a lot of synthetic ones that I love as well, for various different reasons. But again, once you've established what the end goal is, then all of your ingredients and all of your formula is leading you to that point. And so whether you're kind of thinking about these raw materials as individual components and how beautiful they are, it's completely irrelevant. Sometimes I find too that naturals, they can be a distraction, because if I'm trying to go here and then I have this beautiful rose, which I love, and I love this rose extract, it's so amazing, but everyone knows what rose is. And so when they smell that, if rose isn't part of my story, then this has become a distraction. So I think everything in a formula, when you're writing as a scent artist or as a perfumer, it needs to have a purpose, and it needs to get you to the end point. But if your story is about a rose, or if it's about a natural raw material like that you're talking about, even things like sandalwood, then you want those then become assets, and then you're wanting to really showcase the beauty of this natural raw material. But yeah, I mean, I'm more excited, even as a painter. When I was at art school, I was really inspired by abstract expressionism, and so these sorts of art forms I find are really interesting. So I think the same with perfumery. I like this idea of abstraction and not having things that you, when you smell it, you identify it clearly as a natural thing that you know from nature. So I love to abstract.
These days there is lots of sweet fragrances. Is it a reflection about the world more anxious than before?
Look, I think so. I remember we tracked, I think there were a couple of influences. One was after COVID or during COVID, people just wanted to feel safe and comfortable and nurtured. And so some of these sort of sweet gourmand style fragrances became popular because they helped people feel, that they were safe at home with their favorite croissant. The other thing is, I think niche, the storytelling, it became a little bit too much, and it became like an episode of, I don't know, Dynasty, or, these sort of, became very elitist. And so niche, I think, understood that it needed to in order to connect with a younger audience, a Gen Z audience, the storytelling needed to be much more like TikTok friendly and much more fun and playful. And so I think these gourmand fragrances allow niche to still be extravagant and luxurious, but much more accessible and playful. So we saw a lot of, it started with, you have this Agar Wood and Oud fragrances, which were so popular, but they started blending them with fruity notes. I thought it was really interesting too, because when you walk in certain parts of the city, if there's a huge, migrant, particularly from the Middle East communities, they love the flavored tobaccos and things, and often those flavors are very fruity and very playful. And so we saw it sort of almost mirrored in fragrances, where you had these like beautiful smoky oud and sandalwood and woody notes, but then like with passion fruit or mango or apple. This was really, kind of interesting. And now it's almost like we're at a point now where we can just do passion fruit mango by itself. We don't need to have all of the other stuff. And so there's a lot of fragrances that you smell now that are niche, but probably if they were launched 20 years ago, they would be, considered a very different market.
So it means educations with the social media become more and more intense. So people can go to the point directly. If you said we can smell mango and everything more specifically than to a mixed, not clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think trends are moving much more faster than they were, but just purely because social media. Social media is so global. There's so much content, but we're sort of trapped in this quick cycle where the brands have to create something and launch something more regularly because the retailers demand it, because the consumer wants something new every week. And then social media, all the influencers need to be producing content, because otherwise the algorithm will kind of sort of cancel them if they're not constantly creating this content. So everyone seems to be in this really fast cycle of producing things. If I had one wish, I think it would be that we all just slow down, and that if we're producing something, that something has a purpose, and the purpose is not just to keep the cycle going, but actually to produce something of value and something that's interesting, something that's needed, for whatever reason that is.
So you mean you have to make a stop and to be concentrated when you lag, and then to run after one launch. Everything. Every time.
I think we're far from getting to that point. I think this cycle that we're on is going to continue for a little while longer, because it's just become this machine, and we're all caught in the machine.
But individually, we can
choose.
Yes, you can choose.
It's true. And I have I really hope we see this more, but I have a friend, I know certainly for me, like I used to love social media because I felt connected to the world, and as someone that travels a lot, it was a way for me to track what all my friends across the world were doing. But really in the last year, I've felt myself pull back from my use of social media. I have to engage with it because it's part of my job, but I have friends who have gone completely off social media, and a lot of friends who are really focusing on building and strengthening the relationships they have in real life with their friends around them in their communities, rather than trying to be online and omnipresent across multiple sort of communities and countries, and having these sort of digital relationships which are so fast and don't hold as much value, obviously, as if you have people in real life. So I think that's one of my it was my focus last year, and it continues to be my focus this year, of really trying to be more present with people in the real world rather than being a digital personality.
we just speak about social media and about artificial intelligence. What is the impact of the perfumery industry?
I think, this industry, again, because we're moving so fast, so it's anything that is going to allow someone to do their job faster is going to be welcomed. And I think that's where AI we've seen it come in, where brands or companies are using it to do the work more quickly. And I had this happen recently on a project I was working on where AI was involved, and it created twice the amount of work, because for me, AI is only as good, the quality of the output is only as good as the quality of the input going in. It still doesn't have the intelligence to sort of discern good from bad and to sort of produce something at a higher level than a human can. And so this project I was working on, this AI was meant to save us time. It made us invest more time and more focus because we had to go through and correct all of the things. And so this is, it was interesting because, and also, it was producing, so it was creating visuals. And the visuals, when I looked at them, I was like, that's not a real flower. Like it looked like it had referenced things from nature that created something on its own. It's kind of interesting. When we talk about AI slop, everyone's talking about AI slop and, the sort of almost the garbage that AI can produce. So, I know people were concerned that human jobs would be lost because of AI. I haven't seen it yet because I just think that it's not moving as fast as people thought it would. But it is moving, and I think, as I say, we're living in this capitalist world where the goal is to make money. So I think brands and people will continue to use AI where they can take shortcuts and where it's saving money. But I hope the pendulum swinging that way, the pendulum will always swing the other way. So I hope that there will be part of a new culture and maybe a new niche where people respect and, kind of looking for things that are handmade, things that are without AI, things that require skill, like real skill and craftsmanship. I hope that becomes the new niche.
So the niche is moving.
Yeah.
And we are in the Happy Rice conversation. So how could we, which ingredients could we have to express the joy?
I think that'll be individual. The questions I would be asking myself are, when was the last, what are your biggest moments in life where you felt joy? And so maybe it's through some journaling. So maybe describe what those events were. And then maybe the thing that you haven't done before is to try and describe olfactively the environment. So, if I felt that moment on a holiday, maybe I was in Bali. So if I think back, put myself back in that place, what were the smells that remind me of that trip? Was it the food? Was it the coconuts that I was, drinking on the beach? Or, maybe it was something like there's so many mopeds and these bikes going around Bali. So maybe it was just the smell of the dust and the gasoline from the motorcycles. So it doesn't have to be a pretty smell. But, think about your environment in those happy moments. And then if you can link them to smells, try and recreate those moments and those smells and see if that brings you joy.
And for you, which ingredients you use to express joy?
I mean, for me, always sandalwood. I don't know, but the first time I ever smelt sandalwood, and for all time since, it's I feel like I call it my home base. It's a thing that really grounds me. I enjoy it, even mentally, cerebrally. When I'm smelling sandalwood, I love exploring all the different facets of the very complex, kind of odor, smell. And then I've always had a sort of a bias towards white flowers. So whether that's orange blossom or jasmine, tuberose. But for me, again, going back to childhood smells, the school, my primary school.
So you come back to the childhood.
Yeah.
Most of the time, people come back to the childhood to express the scent but the base and the ground.
Yeah. It's isn't that interesting? It's and I don't know what that is. If it's because as children we had less, our lives were less complex, so we associate complexity with stress, and this idea of having no stress means that we're happy, which I think says a lot about who we are and how we're living our lives in this day and age. Yeah, that would be. I think that, and there's something in the purity of those white flowers that I mentioned. So I mentioned I like things like orange blossom and jasmine. For me, they're these sort of floral notes that make me feel very pure and whole, and there's an innocence, I think, connected to them. So I like to have these flowers around me.
And there is traditional questions in the Happy Rise. How will you take care of your inner balance?
I would have to say, like, it's really just about being conscious, right? And knowing, you know, if you talk about balance, then you have to define what that center point is that creates balance. And then once you deviate from that, you know if you're off balance. So I think for me, that's always being conscious of, like, how far have you gone from your center? But then you also, as adults, because we all have busy lives, we all have jobs, we all have commitments. Sometimes you may not be in that center, you might be off center, but you have to make a decision at that point of going, I know that I'm off center. Am I going to be okay? And can I just, you know, if I get through this period of this time, whether it's this week or this month or this year, am I going to survive being off balance? But knowing that at some point, you're going to come to a point where whatever it is that's creating the stress is gone, you're finished. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it could be many things. But then you know how to find yourself back in the center. So I think to answer, that's a long way to answer your question, but I think the answer is to always be really conscious of what it feels like to be completely in balance, because that's always your goal. That's always your measurement, to kind of go, oh, I'm not there. I know I've gone somewhere else. So knowing what true balance feels like, and then knowing when you're off balance and having strategies to help you cope with that time until you can find yourself back in the middle.
And how you can find your center?
I think that will be individual for everyone. I know for me it was, you know, I mentioned I went on this sort of spiritual journey when I was very young, from the age of, I think I was still hitting 18 to 21. I went on a very long spiritual quest. And so for me, that was a moment in my life where I really, truly experienced that balance. Spiritually, physically, everything was really aligned. And so now in this mad world that I live in, I always look back to how I felt, and knowing, you know, the clarity of my mind, physically, everything that I was doing, you know, the routine of the day even that I was following back then. Those are the things that I look to if I'm not feeling 100% and I'm feeling stressed or I'm feeling really, you know, off balance. The question I ask myself is, how far away am I from that balance, from that point that I experienced there? And then thinking, okay, how do I get back to that? And it may not be that you can do that straight away. Sometimes life will not allow you that, and you've got, you know, to show up and do the things that you promised you were going to do, which creates the stress. But as long as you know at some point in your life you have to get back there, that's the goal.
Thank you. I think it will be very useful for people who will listen this.
I hope so. Yeah.
And what kind of what could we say the Clayton of today to the younger Clayton?
Oh,
which advice?
That's a hard question, because I think the way I live this life is that I've always thought I don't want to be that person who is lying on their deathbed and going, oh, I didn't do this, or I wish I'd done this, so I've always been someone that said yes to everything. I've always taken risks. And I think for me, the skill that I think is important in life is not so much to have an idea of where you want to go to plan your life, because life makes its own plans, but it's how you jump from each of the opportunities that are given to you. It's about your ability to be flexible and move through life. That's a real life skill. So I think, you know, if people look at my life, I've done a lot of zigzagging. I've never really been one to go straight through. And so I would maybe say to my young self, like, don't. Yeah, I think that's what I would probably have this conversation now, and I would say that to myself, that it's okay to zigzag, because you grow up and you go to school and they say, oh, you need to be good at this, you need to have a career, you need to have live in a nice house, you have to have money, all of these things, and that they give you this impression you have to go straight through. But actually the beauty of life, and all of my favorite parts of life, have been where I've gone zigzagged and done crazy things. So I think to my young self, enjoy the zigzag.
And you said you have some projects, so you said flexibility and you take some risk sometimes.
Yeah.
So have you some project nowadays?
Yeah, so projects that I'm working on now, the reason when I first became interested in perfume, it was I just had this idea. Okay, I'm trained as a visual artist, so let me be a perfumer, let me create fragrances. And talking about that zigzag. So over the last 20 years, even within the perfume industry, I've been zigzagging all over the place. And so for me, 2026 is really a time where I want to go back to that original intention and begin to explore that and with more focus. So I mentioned when we're catching up, I had an exhibition of some of the work that I've done with another visual artist in Sydney. And so we collaborated actually for the last 6 years on project. I haven't really talked about them too much outside of Australia because the work is really, it's in Australia. But I had an opportunity to showcase some of that work in an exhibition space last month or earlier this month in Sydney, which was really well received. And then in 2 weeks, I'll be in Japan, in Kyoto. So working with a group of perfumers and scent artists, and we're putting on a group show there. And so for me, the 2026 is really about that and doing more of that, and being more creative. I think, not only in perfumery, but, taking time to enjoy using my creative mind, because the world is just, like we're in this place now where we don't know what the future holds. So just, do all of the things that bring you joy. And for me, that's what's been creativity.
Thank you, Clayton. And we are excited to see which creations we have.
Yes, me too.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Merci beaucoup. And see you for our next conversation. Thank you. Thank you.